I'll just introduce it really quick.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Mac, and he's the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Public Allies. You're part of history, which is super exciting. We're about to do our first peer coaching Google Hang, and the topic is on secondary school reform. And so I'd like to introduce my co-host, alum Dan Condon, who works out of Eagle Rock School and Professional Development Center, is taking through this protocol around peer coaching. And so we'll see how this goes today. If it's hot, let's keep it going. If it's not, let's figure out how to make it hot. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dan, my guy, in Boulder, Colorado.
Look at this good-looking cast of characters here. So, for a while, Mac and I have been trying to figure out how to provide some type of interest-based glue to hold some folks in the education realm together around the country that are alum. And I think what we're going to try to do is this virtual critical friends group, which it's kind of born out of two different groups over the last couple decades, School Reform Initiative and the National School Reform Faculty. Kind of the way they work through change process is not through this prescriptive, this is how schools can improve. It's more through a process of over 200 different protocols to help whoever's bringing the dilemma think more critically about what it is and how it is they could improve their practice. So I think it's definitely something that is applicable to any nonprofits, even though it started in kind of the school reform space. And so we're just going to give folks a taste of how this rocks and rolls. I know you are all brilliant people, and I actually reached out to Ryan, and we'll do some intros here in a second. I reached out to Ryan because he's a good friend, and I know he has a lot of dilemmas. So, so we already spoke this morning. I'm actually a critical friends group coach, so pretty adept at facilitating these bad boys. Typically, they're run in something called a critical friends group, which is a supportive group of colleagues that come together at least once a month. But not to say that these tools can't be used as one-offs with groups that never come together again. So much of the work Eagle Rock's Professional Development Center does nationally, there's an element of running these protocols with groups because we are not about prescriptive, telling folks what's wrong with their school. We're more about asset-based solutions, and so that's what we're going to practice with Ryan today. I know Mac very well. I have spoken with my other guest here on the line a few times, Adam. I actually was in Public Allies Milwaukee as a program manager when his cousin went through the program. So I won't hold that against Adam. But maybe we could just do a quick round of introductions before we crack into this and make the path by walking it. Maybe I'll have Ryan go last, and we'll just parlay that into the dilemma itself. So okay. Mac or Adam, take it away. I guess maybe what's up and what interests you about the possibility of this virtual school-based critical friends group?
Go ahead, Adam.
Sure. My name is Adam Kohler. I'm living in St. Paul right now, working in a school outside of the Twin Cities. I was a Public Allies alum from 2010, 2011 in Milwaukee. And I'm interested in this group. I like the asset-based approach to school reform. It's pretty cool to think about it like that. I'm in school right now to be a teacher, so it's a lot more of the prescriptive thing that you're talking about, Dan. So it's cool to see an asset-based approach to making school reform. So that's what I'm interested in, getting that perspective.
Awesome. Thanks for joining.
Awesome. And it's me, Mac, here in Milwaukee. I'm really interested in the possibility, again, of how we might identify other interest areas in our network of alum, right? And using the same framework. So I love I'm excited. I'm interested in the topic, but I'm also interested in nerding out on the framework. Because I think one of the most important things for our alum to know is that it exists, that there is a network that exists, even though we're across the country. So I'm excited about learning how this could be a frame for virtually convening our alums and using it on Google technology, which is free. So that's kind of sweet. So that's my deal, and I'm going to kick it over to Ryan.
Cool.
All right. Well, my name is Ryan Plants. I'm a teacher at Manor High School, which is just outside of Austin, Texas. I was a PA alum back in, 2009 or 10 at Eagle Rock School, so I taught there for a year. And I'm getting married in 5 days. So I'm on the road, I'm traveling, and I'm at a coffee shop that has decent internet, so it's kind of been, I'm stumbling around.
We look forward to the critical friends about your wedding soon after.
Yeah. So that's enough about me. Well, I guess what I teach at Manor High School, I just completed my first year there. I teach world history and AP world history, which are both 10th grade subjects. Obviously, AP is advanced placement, so it's the first college level course that these students have been exposed to. So I could just launch right into my dilemma, hey?
Let me, I'm just going to tee it up just so folks who might be watching, or so Mac and Adam know what it is we did before this call.
Great.
So typically there's a process by which I'll listen to a dilemma. I kind of picked a consultancy because it works pretty well and it's good for entry-level dilemmas. But typically there's like a protocol matching process that you go through. There are some protocols that work better with some dilemmas rather than others. For example, if Ryan wanted to talk about something he was ready to launch, like a program or a class, we probably would have used like a tuning protocol rather than something where Ryan's really not sure where to start. So kind of what I asked Ryan about in terms of the dilemma was like, what keeps you up at night? Like, what is something you're really struggling with that you do not have an answer for? And the other thing we talked about this morning was we didn't want to choose a dilemma that required the action of other people. We wanted Ryan to be able to have some control over what he's talking about. So if the answer to this dilemma was that someone else needs to take action to resolve the dilemma, I would have told Ryan we need to switch up that focus. So what I'll do is I'll just bring folks through the process. We've got about 45 minutes. So the first thing we're going to do is hear from Ryan about what the dilemma is that he's struggling with. And so he's just going to talk to us for 5 to 10 minutes about what's going on, why it's a challenge for you, any important information you think would be useful to us. And just know after Ryan shares this first 5-10 minute bit, Adam, myself, and Mac will just ask some clarifying questions. So I typically find it useful to take notes, but if we have some Rain Man type people participating, feel free just to like log that in there. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. I'm going to be quiet, and I'll just give I'll give some time cues if we're coming up on time. So take it away, buddy.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Okay, so like I said, I kind of stumbled through my first year teaching AP, which is you know, a relatively prescribed curriculum with a lot of freedoms at the same time. So to go back a year, this is my situation. So my school's on the trimester system, which is one of my big first hurdles. So instead of having a full academic year to cover the course, we have essentially 2/3 of the year with longer block classes. So for my students, that's a challenge. Another challenge that I'm facing is that a lot of my students are at just barely at grade level or slightly above grade level readers, and this is a college level course. So the real guts of my dilemma is about literacy and reading, and how can I get my students to where they need to be. So what I did was, I believe there's 5 approved texts for the AP World History, and I chose the simplest one. It's on a 13th grade reading level, so in theory, early college level. It has kind of a narrative story element to it instead of a traditional textbook format. So I chose that because just part of the nuts and bolts of an advanced placement course is outside student work. The students just have to do work outside of class, and a lot of times that's mainly the content. They absorb the content outside of class, whether that's reading or videos, and then we work on the skills in class. And the exam is half content and half skills, basically. Half multiple choice and half writing. So my dilemma revolves around getting these kids college ready, and moreover, getting them ready to pass the AP test and get college credit. So to kind of give them a payoff for all the hard work that they put in. So throughout the course of the year, I kind of stumbled through 3 different strategies to get my students to get that outside work done. First, I worked on using summarization as a tool to synthesize a lot of information into a little amount of information. And I found that I just didn't scaffold that effectively enough. So some students did fine that were a little more capable, and others kind of fell flat. So what I did after that was I changed to like an ID, or like an identification system, where I would give the students key vocabulary terms in each chapter. And what they'd have to do was, I had kind of a proscribed way to do it, but they would have to tell me in one sentence what the person, place, or thing is, and then in a second sentence, why is it significant? So again, distilling a lot of information to a little, the essence of it. That wasn't working so great either. So what I ended up doing was I moved to kind of guiding questions that were not about like the what's right there in the text, but more about like mid-level Bloom's kinds of questions to analyze what's in the text and make connections. So that's a long way of saying my dilemma is what scaffolding and what literacy techniques can I use to get my students who are kind of on the cusp of being college readers but not quite college readers? How can I get them, first of all, the skills they need to read and digest a college level text, and then how can I support them in their independent work outside of my class in absorbing that content and bringing that content into my classroom so we can develop the skills, after the foundation is built.
Okay, I don't know if folks have group chat up, but I tried to capture that dilemma. Typically what we would do now is just make sure that that is the dilemma we want to focus on. I know you started off by saying how could you use scaffolding and something else. I think I might suggest we take that out because that may not be at the root of the dilemma. Okay. So kind of going broader with, can you see what I typed, Ryan, on that little device of yours?
I cannot.
Okay, so I basically just wrote, and let me know if we're right, and we'll revisit this again at the end of our probing questions, which will follow our clarifying questions. How can I get my students the skills they need to read and digest a college level text? And then the second part was about how you can support them to do that outside of the classroom, so they're ready to hit the ground when they step into your space. Does that?
Yeah,
that sound right? Okay. Well, and Mac and Adam, do you have group chat up?
I have not. Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll just keep. So typically, if we were together, I would chart that on a dry erase board or something of the like. So what we're going to do now is step into any clarifying questions. And typically, we're conditioned to jump right to solutions. And so the awesome thing is, with protocols, we're going to get to practice how not to do that. And so for this next few minutes, we're just going to ask Ryan any clarifying questions we have that something it didn't make sense, or I might ask, like, how many students are we talking about? Are you just teaching them once a day, or do you have several kind of several different classes of the same class? So just typically they're yes or no or very factual answers. And I'll gently let you know if we are on the right path. So I'll kick us off, and I just would like to know how many kiddos are we talking about in a class? How many do you have?
About 25.
Okay, and is it just it's one AP class a day, or are you offering the same class several times a day?
So 2 classes.
Got it. Thanks. So that is what we would call a clarifying question. So let's just have at it. What other clarifying questions do you guys have?
Hey, Ryan, this is Mac. Just want to clarify, is that 50 students total, right? You have 2 sections of 25 each, or is it 25 total students?
No, 2 sections of 25 students, so 50 total.
And out of that 50 this past year, how many have succeeded to the rate that you hoped?
Well, we'll see. The scores come out in about scores come out in about a week. But I would hope that about a quarter of my kids have gotten college credit, which would be a success.
And what is the desired, would you say, percentage ultimately? Like, say next year at this time, you'd like to say what out of that?
I'd love a majority. I'd love 50. Historically not like single digit. Like historically, about 2 or 3 students have passed at my school. So it's I've had a lot of colleagues say don't judge yourself on that stat. But you know, I'd love a majority, 50% or more next year.
Great. I'll defer to Adam for a couple questions while I think of a few more.
What you said when you were switching different techniques, you said it was not working. What was your judgment of not working? Was it just a gut feeling, or was there data that you were looking at?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it would be I could just see fundamentally the students were kind of being lazy and working around what I was asking them to do. Other times it was clear that students just didn't understand the skill. They couldn't. They weren't at the stage where they could analyze to the point that I was asking. So at those points, it was basically, let's take 2 or 3 steps back and go over this. Or at other times, because we kind of had to keep the momentum going forward, other times I would just change tactics. Like I would go from the summaries to identifications, mainly as a way to kind of cut down on the content, like the workload, just to kind of get to the meat of it.
And when you would switch those tactics, would it be, how long do you think you would go with a tactic?
Well, until it didn't seem effective anymore. But we did summaries for, I mean, it was about split 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3 for each of those.
Okay.
But what I would find is sometimes the students would get fatigued. Like the summaries was a lot of work. You have to read and then internalize. So there would be it'd be effective, and then the students would kind of, they would, I don't know how I could describe it, but they would kind of maybe grow, that might be stale to them, or they would need something different. But in a perfect world, I'd like a technique for next year that's relevant, engaging, not not too much work, and we can be consistent throughout the year.
Okay.
We've got maybe about another 2 minutes for clarifying, and I just want to get clear on something you said earlier on about the trimester system being a hurdle. You mentioned, so I guess I'm not understanding, I think you mentioned only having like 2/3 of the trimesters to work with throughout a year, or maybe I just,
Right.
so why wouldn't you have all 3, or can you tease that out for me? I don't understand what the hurdle is.
Yeah, so our school has longer periods well, instead of a semester with 7 or 8 courses per semester, we have 5 classes per trimester, and they're 74-minute periods. So essentially, 2 trimesters equals 1 academic year.
Got it.
So whereas the majority of AP students start their course in August and end in May, we're starting at Thanksgiving. So so theoretically, my students have 33% less time, less time on their own evenings to do the work.
Got it.
As compared to a full academic calendar.
I have a question. I'll do one follow-up and then I'll defer to Adam. Is there, Ryan, is there a barrier that people have to overcome to qualify for this sort of group advanced placement? Or is it sort of you take all comers to be in this class?
Sorry, Mac, you cut out right at the beginning. Can you repeat that?
Sure. I was wondering, to be in an advanced placement, do people have to qualify, or can anyone at any level just sign up if they desire to get college credit? I'm sort of just want to get clarification of how
well, that's a good question. Yeah, so that was something we're working on.
Okay.
As a first-year teacher, I didn't have a grasp. As a first-year teacher, I didn't really have a grasp of that. But last year, the guidance counselors just chose students based on their academic history. But this upcoming year, I want to become a little more involved in the process because, it's a choice for students, and I want them to make an informed choice if they want to take on a course like that and a workload like that. So, yeah, so this past year, it was kind of out of my hands and in the guidance counselor's hands.
All right, we may have more clarifying questions, but we aren't going to ask them. So we're going to move into probing questions, and I just cut and paste a big old piece of text there, but a little bit about probing questions, and then I'll model a bad one, and then I'll model a good one. These questions should be worded so that they help Ryan clarify and expand his thinking about the dilemma presented. So the goal here is not for us to simply give Ryan some suggestions for what we think he should be doing. It's for him to learn more about the question he framed and do some analysis of the dilemma. So, for example, a bad probing question would be, Ryan, have you ever thought of trying to implement Karen Smith's literacy circles into your class? Like that's kind of a suggestion couched in a probing question. A good kind of a good way to know that you've asked a great probing question is if Ryan furrows his brow and says something like, wow, you just blew my mind. I never thought of it that way. Right? So the best probing questions Ryan is not going to be able to answer. Now he could feel free to answer them for us or give a shot at it during this section, but really the intention is to deepen his thinking and help him approach the dilemma in a way that he hadn't considered before today. Does that make sense? I'll start, and so I'm kind of, taking off and putting on my facilitator hat. just because numbers are a little thin, but I also think it's good to model what we're looking at. So Ryan, my question would be, if you were to ask your students about this dilemma, I'm wondering if they would see it the same way that you're seeing it. Like, do you feel, I'm wondering if your students would approach the dilemma, or what they would have to say about the dilemma that as a teacher or as adults we aren't considering. And again, you're welcome to say, oh, that's a great question, I'll do some thinking about that. If you want to reply to it, you can do that too. So that's up to you.
You know, that's a really good question. I might actually just email them this summer and ask. But I think that one thing they would say is that it's challenging. Like, they acknowledge that, you know, this outside reading is challenging. And I don't know if they would articulate it like this, but I think that some of the biggest challenges they have in the reading is just not understanding the historical language that's used, which we could go back and cover. And then also sometimes just having connections in the text that you or I might make sense of, whereas a student who's pretty new to history as a course may not make that kind of connection, may not make that inference.
Yep. Thanks. All right, who wants to give a crack?
Hey, I'm going to go. So Ryan, from my perspective, you know, advanced placement is a tremendous accomplishment because you're earning college credit. And I heard in your comments that your peers were there's almost this expectation of like, dude, we only get like single percentage succeeding at this, so don't you know, kind of hold your roll, slow your roll a bit. And I'm just wondering, a probing question I have is, is there a way of looking at it as I had the phrase student as a network, meaning every student is interconnected, obviously to their parents, obviously to caring adults. And I guess my wondering is there a way of mobilizing that network to achieve this really important thing, which is students getting college credit? Like, I apologize if this is maybe a suggestion. So I'm noticing.
Yeah. So let me pause you and
correct it.
Just know that after this probing question section, Ryan kind of plays fly on the wall, and the three of us will have a discussion. And I think it might be better suited for that discussion.
Oh, so let me reframe it. I'm going to reframe it. I got it. I just corrected myself. What would your network say if around the questions you'd ask? If that makes sense, right? Dan just put it on the students.
My network is in.
Yeah, and I guess when I say your network, I would say maybe your your bosses, perhaps, or maybe the head of the local student. I would say like the school board would say around this. And I guess I'm trying to put different perspectives. Maybe that's the probing. I'm wondering if other people see this dilemma, not just the students, but other. I'm putting that in play.
Interesting. I mean, I feel like administrators and school board members.
Oh, bummer.
Uh-oh.
And that's wonderful, right?
You know what? You cut out just for a second, Ryan.
But
do it again. Hit us again. You just cut out.
But I think that. Oh, I'm sorry. So I think administrators and school board members might be really encouraging, just kind of almost blindly encouraging of college level courses. But as a classroom teacher, my role is to say, great, I agree with you, but I need to do everything in my power to lift these kids up because without a very structured and very like intensive curriculum by a talented teacher, these kids aren't really going to have much of a shot. They're very capable, but it's going to take, we're going to kind of have to play our cards really well to get these kids prepared. So I would think that might be the disconnect between someone who's in the classroom and who's not.
I have a question kind of similar to Dan and Max. Have you had a chance to talk about students' goals or families' goals about what they're trying to get out of their education, aside from just your class, but their high school education? Where they want to go with that? Do they want to go to college?
You know,
go to technical school? I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I would say I don't get too in depth in that. You know, we have our first week kind of questionnaire and discussions, and throughout the year I always ask those kind of questions. But I would say for the most part, 95% of these students will go to college, either a 2 or a 4-year college. But I would say not many of them, being 15 or 16-year-olds, have a very clear idea of their academic or their career track. You know, it's kind of in the theory stage.
Okay.
But that would be something to look into for next year.
Hey, Plants. All right, so I love this question, and it's not mine. It can be found in the reflective writing section that typically is done before a pre-conference. So here it is, enough of the wind-up. What do you assume to be true about the dilemma? And I'm wondering how those assumptions have influenced your thinking about the dilemma.
Well, I mean, the two main assumptions that I'm working off of is that, I mean, I've looked at the students' like diagnostic reading scores. So I know, I'm assuming, and I know to be true, that they're on average grade level readers. I'm also making the assumption that they're able to read a college level textbook and they're able to synthesize that information. So I guess that's like kind of making a leap from one assumption to the other. But I think like any teacher, I assume that my students can succeed.
That's good to hear. Let's take, maybe we can each go through one more round of probing. So let's each of us ask one more probing question, and then we're going to have Ryan restate his question should he care to make any tweaks to the overarching question. So who's got another probing question?
Dan, check me if I'm wrong on my question. I'm always sort of sensitive to make sure I'm on protocol. So Ryan, we got into this a little bit, but I'm curious about your take on the pipeline into your class. And it seemed like we were kind of getting to some interesting topics there. So I guess maybe my probing question is around understanding more about how students come into your classroom and perhaps the ideal role you would have in being part of that pipeline. Dan, how'd I do? Or is that weird?
I think that's good.
It's okay? Is it passed? I feel like it's like video review.
No, I think it's good. I didn't hear a suggestion couched in it, so I think that was good.
I'm feeling there's suggestions couched in every question.
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I think that there's kind of two answers to that. So, first, I want students who want to be there, obviously, which is kind of a nice position to be in. I want students that they know what they're getting into, they want to do it, they want to dig in, they want to work hard. The other answer to that would be that I don't necessarily want students who just are there to get college credit. I think that having a student in my class who wants to stretch their limits and wants to challenge themselves and still scores like a 2 on the AP exam and doesn't get college credit, I think that that's still a success in that that student's really challenged him or herself and has hopefully built more skills, history and English skills, than in any other class. So I guess I don't want to, you know, be exclusionary to the students that are in the course, but it's more about students who are motivated, because in all honesty, you know, college credit is an end goal, but it's not the only end goal, right?
I've got a question that's kind of a clarifying question, and maybe I can turn it into a voting question. So I'm curious what the cultural background is of the school, of the students, and if that has any, if you've thought about that having any barriers to their academic achievement.
Yeah, so that is a good question, Adam. So our school is in a interesting part of town. It's on the east side of Austin, so it's kind of very quickly going from agricultural to kind of newly urbanized. About half of our students are Latino, maybe 40% are black, and maybe 10% are white. It's Title I school. I believe about 90% of our students are on free and reduced lunch. So in terms of academic support from home, that's not as always as viable of an option as it would be at another school, because most often our students are kind of surpassing their parents in education. In our school, there's about 30% of our students that are ESL or ELL. So, and I find about a third, that same proportion, are in my AP classes, English language learners. So does that kind of answer your question, Adam?
Yeah, it does.
So I'm going to ask the last probing question, and then we're going to ask Ryan to restate the question, and it could read the exact same way, or there might be a little edit based on the work we've done to this point. So I guess my question is, if nothing changes, what's going to happen in your class?
You mean if nothing like systematically changes? What do you mean, Dan?
So let's say you don't crack the nut. So we heard you talk about 3 different strategies, and you're still searching for like the answer to help your kiddos. So what's going to happen if you can't figure it out?
I honestly think that I'll keep retooling it until I find something that works. I think one of the things that I'm thinking of right now is kind of having almost kind of a book group, maybe a virtual book group, where we can support each other, or even through videos. I can give kind of some, after we scaffold in class for the next portion where students are kind of doing guided work, I could kind of help guide them. But I think what I'll do, Dan, is I'll go back to the most effective strategy I used last year was the guiding questions, and I think I'll stick with those, and just tune them to my students' ability level. Maybe kind of build them up over the course of the year in rigor.
Cool. I'm wondering if the question remains the same. And I'll just reflect that back for you. It originally was, how can you get your students the skills they need to read and digest a college-level text? And how can you support them outside of the classroom in order to like hit the ground running when they get to class? Is it this? Do you feel like it's this? Does that still capture it, or do you want to make any edits?
Well, I think that captures it, but I might just kind of make the addition of, how can I use kind of other assets that I have outside of my classroom? So how can I leverage maybe family or school resources or technology or collaboration to meet that goal? I think would be my only, based on the questions y'all asked.
Cool. How very Public Allies and Eagle Rocky of you. We appreciate that. So what we're going to do, so you're going to pretend like you're a fly on the wall of this Google Hangout. I'm wondering if you can is there a way for you to mute your mic, Rye?
I can mute him.
Oh, you can mute him? Okay,
right.
So don't do anything. But Ryan, you're just going to benefit from the little chat that Adam, Mac, and I are going to have. So fly on the wall, you aren't even here. And we're just going to, so gentlemen, we're going to talk with each other about what we heard from Ryan. It is fair to offer suggestions. They should definitely be framed as open suggestions. And sometimes it helps to frame the discussion by thinking about things like, what did we hear? What didn't we hear that might be relevant? Maybe some more things about assumptions. What questions does this dilemma raise for us in our practice? So those are some things to get us started. But we're just going to have a little chat. Maybe we'll go 5 minutes because I know we're in a beat the clock scenario, and we'll see how we're feeling about it. So this is for the benefit of Ryan, but let's start it off. And I wonder about, is it motivation or is it skill? So like I have this question about, because I heard both things, right? Mm-hmm. So I heard Ryan say some things about, outside reading is challenging. They may not be understanding historical language. But then I also heard some things about when he tried the different strategies, it's kind of like he moved on to a new strategy, maybe when he saw that motivation was part of an issue. So I'm wondering I'm wondering how would I figure out if it's one or the other and what I would do. So that's where I'm thinking a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Also, I wanted to see, Ryan, can you give me a thumbs up to make sure you hear us okay? Because I know I muted you, but I hope. All right, thumbs up. Yeah, I see him smiling. Okay.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Good. All right. Okay. Awesome. Good. All right. I wanted to chime in by wondering the things in my mind. I look at the goal of advanced placement credit as a really significant goal, and I sort of wonder around, is it an individualized thing, or is there a possibility perhaps for a collective approach that might inspire motivation? Like, in what ways might they be pulling for each other, or finding ways that can it be a community goal, so that there's other people outside of that classroom that know that they're pulling for them? So those are things that came to mind, because I could understand maybe if it's a very individualized challenge, maybe motivation varies if you think you're alone, right? But if you're part of something bigger, or maybe it's a quest. And I'm not saying it's going to be stand and deliver, where Jaime Escalante wanted to get them all college credit. I mean, it's not that intense, maybe, but you know what I mean? Like, there's something about, like, you're in this different culture. And my last comment is I'm wondering about the role of culture. I heard comments of, I want people in here for the right reasons, and even though they don't have to get college credit, I want them to be in a different place. And that, to me, suggests a cultural alignment of some sort. And so I'm sort of wondering what steps Ryan could take to create a culture, if not in that space, or perhaps extend that culture wider to the networks that are involved in it. So those are things that come to mind for me.
I mean, it raises the whole, like, carrot thing, right? If it is about the test, like I think you're right on to something there, Mac, about the culture, right? It's like culture of learning, as opposed to, like, the culture of how do I score a 5? Is it a 5? that
Yeah.
we're supposed to score on?
When I was an AP, my AP teacher, again, I came from, the culture was clear. Like when you stepped in that classroom, you were getting a 5. He was like the Herb Brooks of like AP teachers. Like he was not about the love. Like it was a very intense Bobby night thing, and then we knew it going into it. So again, I'm not. That's an example of like that culture wasn't for everybody, but once you stepped in the dojo, you had to deliver. So again, I just to point out culture can be really powerful.
But I feel like you can have high expectations, but maybe the shift toward learning.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you could probably frame it both. That it sounded like he really wants to have it be a culture of learning and a culture of challenging yourself and going through a challenge. So creating that, if you can piggyback those and say that this is the culture of our classroom, you're here to challenge yourself and learn. If that creates a 5 on your AP tests, that's great, that's for you. If not, that's okay, and like creating a culture of understanding that there are differences in levels and that going through the challenge is enough. And the outcome of the number on the test will be different for each person, but still acknowledging that the challenge is what's the important part.
I also wonder, I'm psyched he added that piece about assets, so 2 thoughts. I wonder what it is that really lights them up and fires them up, right? And is there a way to parlay that into what Ryan's trying to do? Mm-hmm. The other piece is, like, kids are smart, right? And so if somehow I'm going back to the way Ryan answered the question about, like, historically how have they performed, and teachers telling him, like, well, don't worry about it, like, well, a couple of them will perform well, right? So it's like, what's the culture that Ryan may be in opposition with at the school, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, how within his pocket can he combat that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, words are powerful, right? They mean things.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. I also think that I wonder, the possibility again of, like, go back to culture, like, where's the room for pride, right? In terms of being special. And not being special like, oh, we're in advanced placement, so we're the special kids. But literally, like, everyone's bought in. Like, everybody's into this. Everybody's nerding out, and not necessarily being, like, the most knowledgeable about American history, but rather, like, personal excellence and being about it. And I think that's where a role of a really, really inspiring teacher can be in, like, knowing that we're all in this to do this. And I think it could transcend in some ways, or at least create that pocket you're talking about. Or what are the roles of students who may be more advanced, having ownership in making sure other people come along. And I didn't hear about it, which is not to suggest Ryan doesn't do that, but it'd be interesting to hear sort of, could students play a role in crafting that culture and having pride that everybody got, quote unquote, everybody got through, or everybody did that. So.
Mm-hmm. Switching it up a little bit, Ryan definitely talked about new techniques and new ways to get his students engaged. So it seems like all of the onus is on him to create all of these things. Mm. If it's possible, like, we're talking about culture and getting the students to buy into that culture and being able to have, it's hard to make assumptions without being in your classroom, Ryan, but, like, if there are ways you can include different, like, learning styles, different techniques that allow them to learn that it doesn't have to be just these 3 weeks is going to be summarization and just these 3 weeks is going to be key vocab, but if certain students are doing well in those different areas and being able to, like, find out which ones they like better, I don't know the best way to do that, but bringing them more into that and understanding how they like to learn.
Mm-hmm. Adam, that your comment, and again, I apologize if this is like telling people what they should do, but I'll just share a personal story. When I was in AP European History, we signed a contract with our teacher, and we were allowed to select different ways of demonstrating our learning. And some of it was actually drawing battle maps. We had to, like, recreate battle maps. And some was you had to do a test and an essay. But one unique way is we played a game of diplomacy, which lasted 5 months long. And the thing is, you would just give us time every week to play this game of diplomacy. And I learned a lot about World War I, how it went down, just by making sure I didn't get stabbed in the back by Austria-Hungary, right? Like, it's so fascinating for me. I didn't know this at the time, but I was a kinesthetic learner. Like, I learned by playing this game about that time. And it was really fascinating how he gained trust in all of us, and maybe it's because we were the AP kids, to like, hey, listen, you got an hour, figure out. We made this contract about how you're going to get this content done. So I'm wondering, maybe, to me, that your comment, Adam, reminded me of that. Who knows? Like, how do people own the way they learn and be accountable for it? And then how might Ryan be a conduit facilitating the best resources or best way for a person to do that?
I mean, that's interesting, and I think that inherently part of the challenge is the test itself.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, when you think about this movement toward proficiency-based education or proficiency-based graduation requirements, it's like, you aren't going to get excited about taking an AP test, right? If there's a way for you to create, Ryan, a proficiency, kind of like Mac talked about, like a byproduct of him rocking out that battle map was that he was probably going to perform well on the test. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't his driver. So I'm wondering, how could like a more personalized proficiency like drive student motivation?
Mm. Right. Like when I think about AP American history, right, it's thinking about how do these different court cases, for example, like, is there a way to make Marbury versus Madison relevant to me in 2014, right? And is there a personal narrative that can be connected? Who knows, right? But I think that's an interesting. I will say this, in hindsight, right? What was cool about that class was you had all the battle maps, you had all the games. It was almost like the teacher was telling you, these are the ways you can manifest this thing in your life today, right? It isn't this book. It isn't this chapter. The diplomacy, like, it happens every day in your life. And I think that was the unsaid thing. It was super relevant, even though that we had to memorize these dates. Like, no, it's super relevant. So
and the book is a tool in that, right? It's not like they're not going to be reading the book, but the book is like a key tool they need to answer whatever question they're getting to. All right, so I know we're coming to the top of the hour. We're going to bring Ryan back into the mix. So I'm going to have Mac unmute him.
Actually, you know what? If Ryan can unmute himself, I think he has that ability.
Okay.
I try to unmute him, but it says, like, he should be able to do it. I hope. Ryan, give it a whirl. Unmute yourself.
So what we're going to hope
Okay, I think
now,
I'm back.
Awesome.
Yeah,
so Ryan, we're going to give you the last couple minutes, but if you would just share like and don't feel like you need to respond to things point by point, but any like major takeaways that helped you think about the dilemma differently. We'd love to hear about where you're at now, how your thinking is deepened based on the discussion you just were privy to.
Great. So yeah, I mean, you guys have offered really good suggestions, and I think I'm in a perfect position starting in my second year of this course that I can really launch a lot of these ideas. A lot of them revolve around the first week of class. Like, I like the idea of a contract. I like the idea of kind of creating a community goal within our individual goals, because there is an element of, like, we need to work together to achieve this pretty grand task. So if I could kind of work on framing that for students, and involving a little more, I don't know if it would be in class or outside collaboration, to kind of achieve that. One way I've just started doing that is kind of turning over some of the content responsibility to the students, and they become responsible to teach in class, which I think has become a really great tool to have students not only, you become an expert if you teach something, but to also stand up in front of a group and do that. Going back to Dan's first question about is it motivation or is it skill? I think it's both, and for different students, it's a different quandary. So, kind of being as explicit as I can about, look, this is the motivation that you need, and this is the work that we're going to have to do. And then on the skill side, being very intentional about scaffolding up, assessing each step of the way so I don't leave students behind. What else? Engagement is like, the student engagement is like my main driving force. And a lot of this discussion is revolving around low-level engagement, getting the content. But like you said, Mac, my hope is to leverage this knowledge into the skill, more skill-based, performative performance assessments in class, which is going to be a big focus of mine because class time is very precious. I also really like the idea of giving students like a menu of ways they can demonstrate their ability. And I think I will definitely launch that next year. I know you guys have seen this, but I'm thinking of that kind of bingo board, like a grid of 9, and you can choose whichever line that you like that incorporates. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that a lot. And I guess that ties also into the whole idea of personal proficiency. How can I demonstrate what I've learned in a way that I'm comfortable with? But at the same time, like Dan's saying, there's something about advanced placement that's a little old school. And it's, it's a bubble test. It's reading and writing. And that's just the reality of the course. And those engaging activities obviously support that. But when the rubber hits the road, like Dan was saying, I think you've got to be able to answer those multiple choice questions, and you've got to be able to write a relatively prescribed, relatively structured essay, So I think that hits everything. The last thing, I guess, is just the whole culture of challenge, which and kind of the cultural alignment at my school. I think one kind of dissonance in my class and my school culture is that I'm kind of keeping the bar way high, and I think historically that hasn't happened. So, which is kind of the result of lower success rates on the AP exam. So that's just my inclination. It's that's what you do. So I think that is one kind of riff that's different in my classroom and maybe the rest of my school.
Awesome.
But I think that hits a lot of what you guys talked about.
So kind of as we close up, because we're a little over time, while it's easy, it'd be easy to end it now. We always end the protocols with just like plus delta, and we always let the person who brought the dilemma go first. So I guess what worked for you, and if you have any suggestions for what could have gone better, love to hear about it, Ryan.
Dan, I know these protocols, and I like the structure. The thing I like the most is that you guys get a good idea of what my problems are, my dilemma is. And I think the best part is the fishbowl where I'm out and you guys are talking. I like that. I'm not justifying myself. I'm not getting in there. I think that's the best part of this. And I'm going home with I'm looking at a list of good ideas. So I like that.
Do we all go? Do we all say something?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. I think it was really cool to see the questions that have no real answers, just like making Ryan think about it in a different way. It could change. This is my first time doing the protocol, so I didn't ask very good probing questions. So I would try and ask more probing questions because I feel like I was making a lot of assumptions about what's already happening in your classroom, Ryan, when we started going later on. So you can ask those more probing questions at the beginning for myself.
Cool. For me, I've done this sort of framework in other spaces, so it's cool to see it applied again. I also really appreciate Ryan's openness and just modeling just the ideal sort of test case, if you will. And I just sort of see great possibility when you have people who are like-minded. And like I said, I don't know much about your field, but I felt like this protocol allowed me to be of service and useful. And so I was really appreciative of that opportunity.
Awesome. If anyone is viewing virtually and has made it through this 65 minutes, I mean, I'm optimistic. I would love to do this once a month. I think it's cool. I mean, I feel like Adam and Ryan are now connected. I know both those guys, but I would really like to see this take off. So I really appreciate you guys, especially Ryan, who I basically was like, dude, I know you're getting married in 4 days, but can you help a brother out? So I appreciate it. Yeah,
No problem.
So thank you.
Awesome.
And I'll see you on Friday, Ryan.
All right, I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
You want to close it out, Mac?
Yeah, thanks so much again for all of those. We had some people chime in and watch, so the lurkers are awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan. Thanks so much, Adam. And, of course, Dan, thanks so much for hosting this. Years from now, they'll say, dude, I was at that first session, even though it's before of it. You know that's how this works.
Just like Farm Aid.
Dude, I was there. So thanks so much, guys, for being there. And let's set up a time next month, and we'll see who shows up. And let's do it. Thanks again, and congratulations on your impending nuptials.
Congratulations, Ryan.
Thank you.
All right, man.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
See you
We'll
guys.
talk to you guys soon.
All
Take
right,
care.
see ya.
Bye.